We are back for another episode of the Keeping It Together podcast.
Yep.
It's me, Rachel Broughton, and Dave Burke. And we're really excited for this episode because we're recording in a new venue, aren't we?
We are. And we're in a place called Shepherd's Dean in Northumberland.
And if you've been to any of our retreat days, the Keeping It Together retreat days, you will know Shepherd's Dean pretty well.
Yeah. And a lot of people in the north of England will know Shepherd's Dean if they've come here for a retreat and found it to be an incredibly refreshing place.
Well, I think anybody who's been to Shepherd's Dean finds it to be an incredibly refreshing.
It's pretty special.
It really is.
Put your finger on why, but it really is a very special place.
Well, actually, just before recording this, we've sat out on the terrace and looked at this beautiful view and just kind of chatted and it's just such a special place. So we are going to record here a couple of episodes and we're looking forward to being able to release them to you. What are we going to dive into today, Dave? What do you want to talk about?
Well, last week, the National Health Service in the UK released their Adult Psychiatric Morbidity Survey for 2023-2024.
Not a particularly catchy title, I'm not going to lie.
No, APMS is the short form.
There you go.
And this is the latest data from an absolutely huge data set. So pretty reliable stuff. And some of the changes since the last time they released data like this are of huge interest, I think, to us.
So what's it recording? What kind of stats is it giving us?
Well, let me give you the headlines and that'll give you the idea. So they've measured the prevalence of diagnosis of mental ill health in the whole adult population from 16 years old to 64 years old. And back in 2007, 17.6% of the population had seen a doctor, GP, about mental well-being. In 2023-24, 22.6%.
So that's a pretty sharp increase, isn't it?
It's a very sharp increase.
Very nearly a quarter.
That's right. And I think it'd be good to ask the question, why? Why that increase? The second thing is that there's a big focus on young adults.
Okay.
And these will be between 16 and 24 years old. And surveying common mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, those kinds of things. In 2007, 17.5% of people in that age group reported those kinds of symptoms. And in the 23-24 survey, 25.8%.
Wow, so it's over a quarter.
That is a massive increase.
Yeah.
And again, why? Yeah. Why is that going on? More young people reporting anxiety, depression, self-harm, obsessive compulsive disorder. There are some to be expected things in the survey, like deprivation in various forms leads to greater vulnerability to mental health conditions. So if you're in debt, if you're unemployed long-term, if you're in deprived communities, those have a very negative impact on your mental health and well-being. And physical ill health has a negative impact as well.
Of course, yeah.
So those two things are confirmed to be very important. And on the positive side, more people are seeking treatment.
Yeah.
So there is a greater awareness of mental health and well-being issues in society, and a greater likelihood of women and men seeking treatment, increasing number of men, which is encouraging because men are traditionally reluctant to do that. And I think across the board as well, women are more vulnerable than men, and young women more vulnerable, particularly.
Dave, is this survey telling us anything we didn't know, or is it confirming maybe what we did know?
I think there's been a lot of small-scale surveys and intuitive stuff around in the culture, and this kind of nails it undeniably with an impressive array of numbers. We'll put links to this material in the notes, and you can have a look at it. But it's well worth a look.
Yeah.
So my question is why? What's going on?
Yeah.
And what are Christians' response to this?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because historically, the church has responded to social challenges and issues, right back to the birth of the church, when it was the Christians who were scooping up abandoned babies.
Yeah.
The the church's ethical responsibility, I suppose, to step up and do something. This is maybe a little less physically visible in some ways, although arguably that's not the case. And I think the question is, well, what is the church's response to stuff like this?
Well, personally, I think this is incredible opportunity for the church to step up to the mark by just doing what it does. We don't have to do very much more. So most people who present at a GP now with anxiety, depression, other things, very often are introduced to a social prescriber who will explore ways, non-medical ways of helping that person to navigate their ill health and improve and get better. And the church does that without trying. So we provide connection with people who care about you. We provide a way of serving, which is another way of feeding into your well-being. When you serve others, when you support others, that feeds into your own well-being in a very positive way. Activities that are positive and helpful, learning new things, pushing the boundaries. And if by getting involved with the church, you imagine you're going to be sitting in rows singing hymns passionately, well, pick your church. I mean, my church don't do that. And other people, you can more or less pick a church that fits your psyche.
That's
these
true.
days. There's a huge variety.
Yeah. I was just, as you were talking then, thinking back to an episode that we did, a conversation we had with Phil Conn around homelessness and some of the challenges around homelessness, and the answer that the church can be to some of the challenges that people with multiple trauma and multiple complex kind of lives have, and particularly the sense of belonging that the church provide. I was recently watching, I don't know if you've ever seen Clarkson on the Farm.
Yes.
Dave. Well, Jeremy Clarkson, love him or hate him, is buying a pub. And he was sort of saying that the main places that people gathered historically, the church and the pub.
That's right.
And he was saying the decline in people going to pubs and the decline in people going to church and the impact then on people's mental health and community is massive. And he was talking about that, and I thought that's fascinating. So exactly what you're saying, the church just being what it is.
Yes.
Actually existing in a community and being.
Yeah. And it's fascinating that a guy who's so well known for his anti-wokeness has rumbled something fundamental to this, that people don't gather the way that they used to anymore. No. That has a negative impact on our well-being. Churches have their core activity, the kind of worship stuff on a Sunday, but they usually have a multiplicity of activities going around there. And just to get people hooked into those and give them something to do, even if it's just the washing up and sweeping up afterwards, can have a massive impact on people's mental health and well-being. They make friends, they've got a shape to their day. And that process of discovering there's actually a purpose for living, a spiritual purpose for living, needs to begin somewhere. And for most people, it doesn't begin by sitting in front of a preacher who's giving you high-octane gospel. It usually begins with something much more relaxed. And
relational.
That's right, relaxed and relational. So Kintsugi Hope is an organization which you can look up on the internet, and they do a little course which is all about hope. It's aimed at people who are not yet Christians, and yet it contains loads and loads of really good mental health and well-being stuff. So I just think these figures tell me that the door is off its hinges for reaching our community with the gospel.
Yeah. One of the stats that really stuck out to me in the report that we were reading is that 1 in 4 adults have had suicidal thoughts.
Yes.
And now that doesn't mean, you've obsessed over it. It doesn't mean that you've acted on it. It doesn't mean any of that. It means that that's happened. And I think as Christians, it's easy to assume that that's happening outside of the church. It's not happening in our context and in our congregations. But the reality is that the stats in this report are representative of the whole of society. And that does include people who are in our congregations.
Yes.
So what does that look like, and how do we as Christian leaders respond to some of that data for our own people?
I think we need to start by saying these numbers are probably exactly represented in our church.
Wow.
So that's my experience of churches, and it's my experience of a broad section of churches. So my church is a kind of Baptist type setup. I've been involved with churches which are very Pentecostal, very charismatic. I've been involved with churches that are very, very kind of relaxed in the sort of classical Anglican style, you know. And I've found more or less these numbers are replicated because I ask.
Yeah.
I ask around. So if you're preaching this Sunday morning, or if you're leading a Bible study this week, or if you're meeting someone just pastorally or one-to-one, the chances are that 1 in 4 of the people in your group are struggling with this kind of thing at some point in their lives.
Wow.
So how is my preaching or my small group leading or my one-to-one work going to reflect that?
I suppose it's a question of, have I considered those people in what I'm about to bring and say?
Yes.
And I suppose my responsibility as the Christian leader is, God, what do you want to say?
Yeah.
Where do you want to lead me in how I communicate with people in those situations?
I rumbled this years ago in the 1980s. So we're going back 40 years, and I was pastor of a church in Leicester, and a little team recorded on old-fashioned cassette tape the sermon each week and made them available to people. And most weeks you get a dozen, 15, 16, something like that, people borrowing the tapes. And then we did a series on anxiety, depression, and things like that.
That must have been groundbreaking in the 80s for you, Dave.
It was a first. And what was really interesting is that the number of tapes borrowed spiked into the hundreds.
Wow.
Because suddenly you were scratching where people
were actually itching.
And actually, if you look at the Bible and you ask the question, well, what's this passage about? Who wrote this passage? Where does it fit in the Bible story? Ask another question. What's the mental state of the person who wrote this, or the person featured in the passage? You can't always tell, but the Psalms you can. And in some of Paul's letters, like 2 Corinthians, you can. And if we start talking about the Bible's heroes as vulnerable human beings, rather than superheroes who couldn't possibly have faced these kinds of problems, we'll find actually that we're dealing with a completely different quality of ministry, which meets people's needs.
Yeah, I'm immediately thinking about somebody like Gideon. You know, immediately just thinking of his vulnerability.
Yes.
And actually how God doesn't push him away because of that, but actually meets him in it and uses it for his glory.
And David is incredibly honest about his psychological state in some of the Psalms, Psalm 6, for example. And Jesus, you see on the edge in the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, the pressure is massive. But don't forget, the New Testament tells us that Jesus was fully human.
Yes.
And he went through these things just as we do. And the very best pastors are people who've been through some of this stuff and understand it from the inside.
With reports like this, is there a danger that we are in a culture now where we're over-reporting? We feel a bit sad for a week and we go to the doctor and we're reporting a severe depression. You know, is there a danger that these reports are maybe exaggerating the state of our society and our mental health?
I think one of the defense mechanisms we have is denial. So you read these numbers, you hear this report, and you say, oh, come on, this is ridiculous. It's being overdiagnosed and overreported. And that might be true. That might be true because part of this, between 2007 and now, is the increasing awareness of mental health in the population.
It's in the news, it's in our education system. We're talking about it more. There's support groups for all sorts of people all over the place, and people are aware of them.
That's right. So that has a bearing. And it's crept into the language now. And part of human behavior is that we sometimes use our physical health, our mental health, to kind of explain why we haven't functioned as we should.
Sure. Excusing.
Yeah, making excuses and stuff like that. All of that's happening because we're human. But the reality is, the people who diagnose these kinds of things aren't idiots. They know this too. And to be honest, the pressure in the NHS is to try very hard not to spend lots of money on things you don't need to. So I think there's a need to respect the professionals here, a need to respect the category of mental ill health. And even if the numbers perhaps aren't quite as great as this report says that they are, this report is very compelling, and we mustn't neglect it.
Yeah.
We were talking about this earlier, weren't we? And we're talking about the possibility of using mental health language as part of my identity. You know, and somebody who feels a bit anxious at the minute because they have an exam maybe coming up.
Circumstantial stuff.
That's right. I have anxiety. I am ill. No, you're not. You're facing a challenge.
You're a human.
That's right.
You're dealing very normally with a stressful situation.
And your psyche is gearing up to perform. And that gives you a very unpleasant feeling in the pit of your stomach. Part of the function of that is to make you do the work. And so when I talk to students, one of the things I say a really good key to dealing with anxiety is put the hours in, do the work. And now, some people step over the threshold where actually they're not just gearing up for a challenge, they're not well.
Yeah.
And that criterion between those two things, doctors do that. I can't do it. I'm not a doctor. But a doctor can do that and make a decision about whether this person is actually ill or not. We need to respect the people who make that decision because they don't do it lightly.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, this is a really helpful study, and we'll make sure that we link the details for it.
That'd be great.
And
the actual study itself starts with a summary of the highlights.
Yeah.
So you don't have to read the whole report.
Yeah. So you can read the first couple of paragraphs and get a good idea of where things are at.
That's right.
Brilliant, Dave. Thank you ever so much for that.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.